Are Brant ER needs really that bad? Does this set a bad precedent for future Wuthering Waves characters? Let's talk about all of that today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, so we should start by discussing how bad the situation actually is. Brant's kit is available in the Crossing Stars menu, so we already know that his kit is going to be very ER hungry. In fact, from what we already currently have in-game, we can already decipher that he needs a whopping 250% ER in order to proc the Tiebreaking Courage set, which we can assume is Brant's main dedicated Echo set. That is a really high amount of ER. The only other character that we currently have in the game that scales so hard off of this stat would be Shorekeeper. Now, if we've already had to deal with that lovely computer waifu, why are we all making such a big deal over the pirate in particular? Well, you see, from what we can gather about Brant's kit as of now, it seems as if damage is going to be very important for him. Building him is going to be a task, I'll say that much. Whereas with Shorekeeper, achieving her ideal ER requirements is very easy. With Shorekeeper, you get ER percents from many sources, 10% from her nodes, 10% from Fallacy, and she has plenty of accessible weapons that offer her plenty of ER percent. And while you can benefit from building crit damage on her, so that her outro skill can offer some small damage contributions, you're able to achieve a balance of stats on her very easily. Her energy requirements are easier to fulfill on the whole, and building towards her outro skill's contribution is purely optional. Generally, her demands are not that difficult to satisfy, even if they seem daunting on paper. And because she doesn't care about damaging stats, you can super easily get away with running double ER percent 3-cost echoes, because that's the main stat that she wants in order to function at her best. So sure, while we've encountered a 250% ER requirement before, the circumstances that the two characters are under are vastly different. So what exactly are Brant's circumstances, to be more specific? After all, Tiebreaking Courage provides it with 10% ER from its 2-piece, no? Well, that's only one piece of the puzzle. He's not getting any free ER percent within his kit, in the same way that Shorekeeper is. As we can see in the Crossing Stars menu, none of his nodes feature any ER percent in the same way that Shorekeeper's do. And because he really wants damaging stats due to the nature of his kit, you won't be able to make the most out of his kit by going ER percent. You're ideally gonna want to go for fusion percent ER percent on him if you're using an ER percent weapon, meaning that you have to balance having good crit rolls, good ER percent rolls, and a healthy amount of damage percent and attack percent. Yeah, right from the get-go, his stats are way harder to balance out, so you're probably going to turn to an ER percent based weapon, correct? The only 4-star weapon option that we currently have in the game that has an ER percent main stat is Overtur. That's a strong yikes from me. And even then, you still want some really solid rolls in order to balance out having a good amount of crit percent and ER percent. So sure, his ER requirements at a baseline are the same as Shorekeeper's, but one unit has far more things working in her favor, whereas the other has to deal with needing very high quality stats across the board. So now this begs the question, is this a total deal breaker? I would say that if you're unable to secure a good ER weapon for him, yes, sadly, this is a very rough deal breaker. The only other way that you can reach his required amount of ER will be through obtaining literal perfect echo substat rolls, and even then, you still might not end up with enough. It costs a ridiculous amount of wave plates to optimize the dude. However, if you're able to secure a good weapon for him, then we can put him back on the table again, because achieving his asinine needs will actually be much more realistic. Don't get me wrong, it'll still be somewhat of a frustrating task, but you can do it far more achievably. You'll still need stupidly good rolls, making him one of the hardest characters to build in Wuthering Waves on the whole, even with an ER percent main stat weapon being thrown into the mix. However, at least building him will actually be achievable at that stage. Also, the nice thing is that once you do actually manage to build him well, he genuinely hosts a lot of potential, being one heck of a versatile teammate, allowing for both the strongest and easiest to play Changli team to date, and being an absolute powerhouse of a second slot teammate for all future scale or fusion based characters that'll eventually come out, thanks to that outro skill of his. That's not even mentioning all of his other goodies, such as his healing and ability to deal solid personal damage. Plus, I have no doubt in my mind that he'll be an excellent choice for Whimpering Wastes. Brant is an extremely good unit. His issue lies in what it costs in order to actually utilize said kit. I'd say that if you're a Changli main or just somebody that seriously enjoys Changli as a character in general, it's extremely difficult to recommend missing out on Brant. I'd really put the effort into deal with his ER requirements, because the unit you get at the end of the struggle is genuinely worth the hassle if you're somebody that likes the gorgeous Phoenix Lady. His positive qualities are genuinely so striking, and I can understand what Kuro was trying to do by giving him such absurd requirements. He is a jack of many trades, master of them all. This was their attempt at trying to balance him out. The idea is fine in concept, but I would have reduced his minimum ER requirement by about 20 to 30% so that echo substat rolls can be more forgiving, because as it stands, his build is very unforgiving. This also begs the question, is this going to set a bad precedent for future units that Kuro makes? After all, people absolutely love Brant and fell in love with him for all sorts of reasons. whether that be due to his character design, presence in the story, or just because he's a cool pirate dude. People want this character, and I'm sure that Kuro has taken great notice of his high popularity. As the game continues to get older, we are going to get more and more niche in terms of units that we get. Kuro will have to start honing in on more specific niches and archetypes. However, I don't think that means that characters should be made so difficult to build to accompany their more unique kit and playstyle. Brant wants an ER% weapon just as much as Yinlin wants her Stringmaster in order to function at a reasonable level. Stringmaster arguably had more of a meta impact than Yinlin herself did. We have seen through her that designing a unit that has their value this tied to their signature weapon is just a really rough route to take. Yes, the weapon banner is indeed guaranteed. Brant's weapon hasn't been officially revealed yet, but if Shorekeeper is anything to go off of, I don't doubt that it'll most likely feature some of the stats that he really wants in order to feel complete as a unit. But just because it's guaranteed, shouldn't mean that we get characters that feel somewhat incomplete without their absolute best picks. I honestly would have gladly traded Ocean's Gift for an ER sword that suits kits like Brant's more. Phoebe already had an amazing free-to-play friendly option in the rinascita craftable rectifier, because she's actually able to utilize negative statuses, and she's able to use 5-star rectifiers such as Stringmaster to great effect. Meanwhile, Brant's options are far more niche. He was way more in need of a good free-to-play event weapon. I seriously hope they do what they did with Shorekeeper when it comes to Brant. If you don't have the computer waifu signature, you can opt to use her own variation. However, that's a gacha weapon. Not everybody is going to have a copy. So the absolute legends over at Kuro Games slotted a free-to-play friendly ER option in for her, which is permanently available via a questline in Thessalio Falls. Is this line of quest for anybody who doesn't have the weapon but wants it? Brant needs similar treatment, because as it stands, he is on his way to falling into a similar predicament as Yinlin if he doesn't get it sorted out soon. A 5-star character that is completely tied to their main signature 5-star pick. And because Brant's kit is so specific in terms of stat requirements, weapon sharing can't really save him. It's all pretty grim. And yes, it is indeed normal for a limited 5-star character in Wuthering Waves to seriously be in want of a good 5-star weapon. This isn't fresh news to anyone, but I think that most of us can agree that having a character this reliant on their signature is just a bit too far. A unit should still be able to clear with relative ease if given a standard 5-star weapon. I'm sure Brant will do fine with Emerald of Genesis, but I doubt that he'll be performing to a standard anywhere remotely near his max potential. Brant on a 4-star should be able to clear fine too, but you just aren't going to get an impressive amount of damage, which is a shame when you consider that his personal damage output is one of this pirate lad's finest qualities. You could argue that this is a necessary evil for future units. Not all damage-dealing characters are going to be simple attack scalers, and as the game goes on, we're going to get more niche scalers such as Brant. It could also be a case of the game simply not having a ton of 4-star options right now, due to the fact that it's less than a year old, so more niche scalers like Brant are naturally going to be releasing without many good options to their name. However, they could have very easily balanced things out better. You see, if they reduced his baseline requirement by about 20 to 30%, he would be far more accessible to build for the average player. Then, keep his max cap at 280% so that you can still justify reaping great rewards out of using a good ER% weapon on him, also rewarding people who go out of their way to get an especially good build for him. The issue here is that his baseline is difficult to achieve. Needing perfect rolls to even start properly taking advantage of a unit is extremely demanding. Okay, you do get your value's worth when all said and done, but you could have much lower echo quality on any other character and still get the job done just fine. Niche scalers are going to increase in number. This is an inevitability, and as we get more of them, they're all going to either feel really sig reliant on release, or are going to feel like they need a super specific setup to make them work. I do generally really like Brant's kit design, but 250% ER is too steep of a baseline requirement when provided with no inbuilt unlockable ER% nodes. Knock it down to 220 to 230%. I sure do hope that in the future, Kuro provides some new event or craftable options that suit Brant really well to alleviate the burden of building him by a bit, because as it currently stands, it's either go big or go home with him. I don't think Brant sets a bad precedent for having a unique scaling in general. That in of itself can make building a character more interesting. But he does set a bad precedent as to how these characters may be handled, giving them very high baseline requirements when there isn't really a lot of accessible gear to help them with said problems on release, or without providing anything within their own kit to aid said issue. The solution is simple. Tune their requirements to fit realistically with the gear and tools available to the average player around their main release window. Event weapons are an easy workaround. Otherwise, add new accessible gear down the line to help out, such as craftables or a brand new 4-cost echo. Remember, part of Brant's problem isn't just the ER requirements themselves, but the fact that you have to balance them with no support from his nodes while needing to balance said high requirements next to great crit percent and attack percent rolls. Yikes. I do hope that Kuro doesn't do this in the future. Brant has a lot going for him, but his absurd build requirements really throw off his pull value for a lot of players. If you have enough to guarantee the character but not the weapon, which I assume will most likely fix a lot of these issues, the same way Yinlin becomes a whole lot better with Stringmaster, Yeah, he's gonna end up feeling somewhat incomplete. Well, I don't think that his ER needs are deal breaker of a century, seeing as we do indeed have a competent 4-star option for him. I don't want him to set this as a precedent for future upcoming units. Let's leave the Yinlin kit design strategy back in 1.0, why don't we? After all, Brant's situation is arguably a lot worse, since Yinlin doesn't need an absurd amount of any specific stat. I'll still be pulling for the lad, but I do think it's important to highlight this core flaw of him, even if I still consider him to be a very good unit in spite of this. This was a large point of contention that a lot of people had with the character, so I wanted to discuss it in more detail, giving my personal meta take on the matter. What do you think about Brant's ER needs? Are you no longer pulling for him due to them, or are you still absolutely locked in for everybody's favorite pirate lad? Let me know down below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturdays, starting from 3 PM UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to tell you whether Brant ER requirements are a deal breaker or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and I guess it checks out that the funky guy who's always acting at his 100% has such an absurd ER requirement.